We are Rogue Media Sports.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the Doomsday Podcast after another Cowboys win. Ed Werder alongside Matt Mosley from Frito Nation Productions. And, Ed, as we get ready, boy, you hooked another big one. Got a big guest coming in. It is Stephen Jones will be joining us today. And so many things we want to go over with Stephen for sure. But, Ed, while we wait for Stephen to join us here in a few minutes, the Cowboys, in their just very, very small playoff chances, they something positive happened for those chances yesterday. And I'm not talking about Seattle or any of the other things that happened. Just the Cowboys, for one day, sort of, they went back to their blueprint and they found a way. Now, for 3 quarters, it was not pretty at all. But this is a fourth quarter team, Ed. You know that.
Fourth quarter of the season team, it better be.
Exactly.
Tom Landry used to divide the season up for his players in perfect 4 quarters, games, 4 games at a time. And obviously in this final quarter of the season, the Cowboys have pretty much got to win every game. As it stands right now, they're 7-6. They're outside of the playoffs right now. But some positive things have happened, not necessarily the teams that they needed to lose following through and providing that result for them. But the Carson Wentz injury could affect the Cowboys because that's their Week 17 opponent, and could certainly, if he's out for the season with that ACL injury, make them far more vulnerable should the Cowboys get into the postseason. They've got a game, obviously, this week against a Raiders team that has fallen apart, will pose something of a threat to their young secondary. Then they've got Seattle at home on Christmas Eve. They'll get Ezekiel Elliott back for that game, and presuming he's kept his word and stayed in shape, despite apparently spending this time in Cabo, then they should get a boost from that for those final couple of games. And whether that's enough remains to be seen. Still looks like in the NFC it's so competitive. There are so many quality teams that a 10-win team could certainly be left out. So the Cowboys could win out and still not make the postseason. In fact, I believe they have only, according to actuary tables, have only like a 5% chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah, Lee, I love it when you talk about actuary tables. I mean, I think if you hadn't gone in and had this illustrious career in sports journalism and being an actuarial, is that a thing?
An actuary.
Actually,
it's an actuary.
Yes, I think you could have pulled that off.
There still may be time.
You're mastering in numbers.
Considering my current employment status.
Nah, you're fine. You're doing great. And I tell you, the Doomsday Podcast is doing great because Stephen Jones getting ready to join us on the other side. Frito, play the music.
Matt, we've had many an acclaimed, famous guest on this show, and now we have another. His son is a very well-known and highly prized college football quarterback and the starter at Highland Park.
Did you hear there was some news on that?
I did. We should ask about that maybe to start. Stephen Jones, the executive vice president, pro personnel director, the architect of this 7-6 squad over at the Star, is our guest for the first time on the Doomsday Podcast. Stephen, welcome.
Welcome, guys. Good to be on.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Tell us about the big events involving your young son and his status as a burgeoning college football quarterback at a major college program that you and your father, Jerry, know very well and probably fund heavily.
Well, first of all, he had a big win Friday night and against a really tough Mansfield Lake Ridge team. They were able to pull it out, and course, advanced to the semis. Well, they'll play a real tough team in Denton Ryan, but got a great group of guys, a great coach in Coach Allen, and he's had a really, really special run there at Highland Park, winning the state championship last year, and of course having a great year with his teammates this year and have another shot. But he was it's been a good couple of weeks. He's been offered by Texas Tech as well as the University of Arkansas, and so things are coming into place for him, as his dream was to not only have a successful high school career, but to get to go on and play college football, and it looks like he's going to get that opportunity.
Now, do you sense, Stephen, he might end up with even more offers than you had coming out of high school? Does he seem more coveted at this point than I'm trying? I don't remember your recruiting, so by now you're probably a 4 or 5 star, but I don't know if they had that designation back then.
I don't think they had those then, but he's a much better. He's a much, much better football player than I was, and definitely I think more coveted. I had a couple of things going on, but I committed early to the University of Arkansas, and but there's no question he's a much better player, and I'm sure he'll be a much better college player as well. And I think I'm enjoying watching him more than I did playing myself.
That's how fatherhood works when it's at its best, right? You're enjoying your son's success more than you did your own.
Yes, absolutely. But it's been a magical run, and he's been fortunate to be a part of a special group of men and a special program at Highland Park there.
Well, let's talk about another quarterback, one who obviously had gone through maybe the most challenging period of his time without Ezekiel Elliott. Cowboys lost 3 consecutive games. What's Dak Prescott shown you with what he's done these last 2 victories after experiencing that disappointment for a prolonged period of time?
Well, he's committed, his commitment to the game. At any point in time, you're probably at some point, going to hit some bumps. He obviously had a magical start to his career last year, and, to me, exhibited everything you look for in a franchise-type quarterback in terms of his leadership, the it factor, his, insatiable appetite to want to be the best. And, I think that's paid off for him this year. Obviously, it was tough when Ezekiel started his suspension. I think we had, as much as we thought we were prepared for it, I still think we, had a difficult time really finding our identity without Zeke. And certainly he led our guys, led our offense to, stay in the fight there. And we came out of that tailspin, and now we've put together 2 wins back to back, and feel like we can get on a roll now. And you never know. I know we put ourselves behind the 8 ball with those 3 consecutive losses, and we certainly need to win our remaining games to stay in the hunt. And as we all know, we need a little help as well. So we're just staying focused week by week. Obviously, our focus now is going out to Oakland and playing the Raiders. And certainly they were a team that was expected to really be at the at the top of the heap this year. But they've had their own struggles. So, it's a team that can certainly step up and give you fits, and we're going to go out there and have to play a really good game, but I think we can do it.
How important do you think it was, and you hit on it, you kind of got in that tailspin, but for Dak to be able to pull this off, because Stephen, what all the critics and what everybody was saying, well, you guys can't function without Zeke. And in some ways, whether they intended it or not, that's sort of an indictment of the starting quarterback. How important do you think it is to have a couple of these performances, get a couple of wins without Zeke, just for his confidence? I mean, he seems like an incredibly confident guy, but you know how hard it is to keep your confidence if you get in one of those slides.
Yeah, no question. And, there was no doubt in my mind he would do it because I do. Like you said, he comes across as an incredibly confident guy. I think he is an incredibly confident guy. He has a lot of belief in himself. He prepares and works as hard at the game as anybody I've ever been around. He has a great way with his teammates, and, you just had the confidence that things would come around for us. And, we were able to start to execute and find some things that work for us. But, I do think, Matt, it was important for us to go ahead and get those under our belt. And I think that'll pay off down the road because, as we all know, injuries are a part of this game. There's all kinds of ways you can miss a football game in this league. And, we have to be able to overcome those type of things, whether it's missing a Sean Lee, whether it's missing an Ezekiel Elliott. We have to, if we're going to ultimately become the team we want to become. And, there's a lot of reasons to be excited. Obviously, it starts with our offensive line, solid. There's a lot of young players who are starting to make plays on the defensive side of the ball. So we have a lot of pieces in place. And for Dak to be able to step up here and for us to beat two NFC East opponents back-to-back after really getting a confidence check with the slide we had is important. And I think, obviously, it's going to be equally as important to go out to Oakland and win another football game under a lot of pressure to stay in the hunt for a playoff berth. So no doubt in my mind, Coach Garrett will have our team prepared. No doubt in my mind, Dak will be ready as well as the rest of our team to go out and play a good game and hopefully keep ourselves in the hunt.
And that should be the last game you play before you do get Ezekiel Elliott back, the NFL rushing champion as a rookie, and obviously a pivotal part of your football team, as you mentioned. I know you can't have, during his suspension, any direct contact with him, but how have you been able to monitor what he's doing and what kind of shape he's in, and what are your expectations when he comes back for those final two regular season games?
Well, we really hadn't. Obviously, we can't have contact with him, and understood that he was going to get away and really focus on getting himself in better shape. I think he was playing a little heavier than he did last year. I think he was wanting to lose some weight and really recommit himself to the game. Obviously serving the suspension. You can argue that it was a little on the heavy side, but in spite of all that, he made some poor decisions and he paid a price for it. And I think he understands that, and that's he wants to be committed to the game and being one of the great players to play the game. And certainly he can do that if he has his commitment and he's accountable to what he can be. So we really don't know anything about where he is at this point. Our expectation is that he comes back ready to play and hopefully even better than when he left. So if he can do that and we get us a big win against Oakland, then certainly we feel like that we can run the table.
Yeah, and that would put you at 10-6 and put you right in the conversation if you were able to run that table. Talking to Stephen Jones, Cowboys vice president of personnel. Stephen, is that going back to where, and a lot has been made of, well, is that the best place for Zeke to be in Cabo, which unfortunately has a little bit of a connotation with, as you well know, going back to 2007 with Cowboys lore. But knowing how important it is in the program y'all have in place for players that have had maybe some issues off the field, is that a little bit of a helpless feeling when you have a guy who's, run afoul in some areas or made some poor decisions, that you can't have that involvement and can't have your people around him? I would think that has to be, a little bit tough on you guys.
Well, those are all things that are debated at the league level. And, there is a school of thought that the players would be better off, in a football environment in and around the football team, but just not able to play the games. And, of course, we do that with some of the suspensions. We just obviously don't do it with this particular one. And, I think it's debatable. It's obviously the way the rule is today is that we can't have contact with him. We would probably be in the school of thought that he would be better off training and being around his teammates every day and being in a football environment where there's no distractions. But hopefully, he's focused. Hopefully he's recommitting himself. And, at some point, to really get over the hump here, these guys have to be able to go out and be accountable to themselves, be accountable to their teammates, and do things the right way. And hopefully that's what Zeke's doing right now.
Stephen, not only did you win an important game yesterday without Ezekiel Elliott, but you really did it in sort of an uncharacteristic way. You guys had been among the worst teams in the league in terms of creating explosive plays without Elliott in the lineup. And yesterday, not a historic day, but 3 50-yard plays, 2 of those for touchdowns, and 1 to set up another 20-yard touchdown pass to Jason Witten. That's not the way typically you guys have won. Do you think the players recognize the value now of a short passing game and run after catch and all of those things, and the significance that can play in the outcome of a game?
Well, we certainly have understood that they're lacking when we hadn't had Zeke in our games, the last 4 games leading up to this game, that, we just weren't making the explosive plays. And we know how hard it is in the NFL to go the long, hard way. And to have those drives that get the plays are in the teens in terms of what it takes to get in the end zone, that you got to be pretty flawless. You can't have penalties. Obviously, it goes without saying, turnovers, but to be able to have some drives where you have some big chunk plays involved and it cuts the number of plays down to get into the end zone, I think are crucial to being a good football team. And we certainly know we've been missing those, but at the same time, we were working on how to get those back in our game. And fortunately, we were able to have a handful of those against the Giants. And I think, at the end of the day, that made the difference. And I think as we move forward, we have to continue to work on, even though we feel like we can have those long drives. And sometimes those long drives are back-breaking drives for your opponents. When you're in the fourth quarter and you need a long, sustained drive, you can really put a game away when you can do that. But at the same time, it is, I think that's what separates the great ones from the good ones, is when you can have the quick strike plays as well. Makes a huge difference in terms of winning football games.
I think the headline in the NFL on the week is going to be that the Eagles have potentially lost their starting young quarterback Carson Wentz, potentially for the remainder of the year. What effect do you see that having on you, since they're your Week 17 opponent, and just going forward as far as looking at how that changes the equation in the playoffs in the NFC?
Well, as I said, no one feels sorry for anybody. Everybody has injuries, and certainly those are very difficult ones. We've gone through that with Tony Romo, and, it can make a huge difference on your football team. At the same time, we're focused right now on the Raiders. Whenever you play a team and they're missing a good player, it makes a difference. And certainly Carson Wentz is, going to be a special football player in this league. We saw, a big glimpse of it here, the first part of this season, and certainly hate, for any player to get hurt, for the remainder of a season. It's, you hate it for the game, you hate it for the league, but at the same time, it is a part of our game, and we have to focus on the Raiders right now. The Eagles have clinched the division, so it's not going to make any difference, on our fate, other than, when we play them on the last game. If we're able to do our job and put ourselves in a position that we're still in it when we play the Eagles, then we'll certainly address that at that time.
Stephen, the Sean Lee, obviously the only downside is that he's had some injuries over the years. But when you watch what he did yesterday in 18 tackles, and I think, my gosh, Hitchens had 14, so 32 tackles combined. Is that about as dominant a performance? It seems like we almost say that on a weekly basis about him, how he sort of takes over a game. What does he do for that defense in your team overall?
Well, he's not only a great player on the field, but his leadership, his intangibles, his energy. He's on top of all the above. He's the quarterback of the defense. I think all the players feel much better when he's out on the field. He not only knows what he's supposed to be doing, but he knows where everybody else is supposed to be, and does an incredible job directing traffic. I just think, he makes everybody around him better. And on top of the fact, he's a dominant player when he's healthy in the game. I think we've lost one game this year up in Denver when he's actually been in the lineup. So certainly not unlike somebody we were talking about with Zeke. He's one of those guys that makes a huge difference when he's in the game. And we're certainly lucky to have him. I think he's one of the best players in the league when he's healthy. Certainly he battles those demons in terms of staying healthy. And I think a large part of that is just because he lays it on the line. He's 110% when he's out there. He doesn't pace himself. It's all out with Sean, and I think sometimes that can be to his health detriment. But he's just a special football player, and we're lucky to have him.
So there's on a league scale, there's a significant event this week in the local Dallas area, and that is the NFL owners, Commissioner Roger Goodell, coming in for a winter meeting. Obviously, this has been a contentious issue, Stephen, with Jerry and his opposition to the commissioner getting a contract extension at this time, but it's now been signed and agreed to. But Jerry's going to get an opportunity to address the other 31 owners in the room in Las Colinas this week. What are your expectations, and how do you guys feel about what's taken place?
Yeah, I think, to be fair here, Jerry's been the one speaking to this, and he's really, I think, going to save his comments till after the league meeting so, he can take everything in and understand everything. So we're really not going to make any comments, and when we do, it'll be Jerry who makes those comments as they pertain to our thoughts and our views of the process of how we've extended Commissioner Goodell.
So you're just going to get your popcorn ready? Is that what you're saying? You'll have a seat on the helicopter, but your popcorn is ready.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting, but we'll wait until till that meeting's over.
Have you during that whole process, Stephen? Have you regretted it all, or just as contentious as it's become, at least from a public standpoint, and the stories and in the leaks that are coming out of all those meetings? Has that been tough for you to watch? That becomes such a big story this season?
Not really. I mean, at the end of the day, again, Matt, I just want to save any of our comments till afterwards. But it's not been difficult. No, I think at the end of the day, everybody wants the league to be the very best it can be, and obviously, Jerry, myself, the Cowboys feel that way, and as we said, we'll make additional comments and more detailed comments as we move forward.
Oh, now we're going to have a travel budget to go over to Las Colinas.
Yeah, I was wondering.
At least y'all will be close.
You've got the draft coming here. Have you ever thought about maybe making the owners' meetings public and inviting some fans out to witness some of that?
I do think there are parts of it that are filmed on the NFL Network, but I think those mainly have to do with the competition committee rules. I don't know if they get into the business side. But anyway, it'll be great that it's right here in Dallas and right over there at Las Colinas. So it'll be short travel for most of our friendly media.
And it's going to be interesting as we go forward here.
What friendly media are you talking about? I'm not.
Well, they have their own media over there at the Star.
Oh, okay. He's talking about DallasCowboys.com.
Oh, that's what I figured. Anyway, so, Stephen, we thank you for joining us. I think it's going to be a fascinating close to the season here. The Packers are in a similar situation to you, and they're going to probably get Aaron Rodgers back this week, and then you'll get Ezekiel Elliott back, and we'll see if you can get to 10 wins and whether that's enough in the NFC this year.
Absolutely. Well, great being on with you guys, and look forward to being on with you again soon.
Thanks, Stephen. We appreciate your time and insights.
And there he was, Stephen Jones. Ed, nice job getting Stephen on, and always good to have him on the day after a game. A couple of things we need to react to right away there, Ed, and thought that was very interesting in Stephen talking about Zeke, and one of the things that jumped out to me was him saying that not only needed to maybe make a recommitment, but wanted to lose some weight. Thought he was playing a little heavier this season, and that was a very interesting thing because one thing Stephen really avoids doing, even more so than Jerry, is ever really being critical of players. I'm not saying he hasn't done that, but I sensed in that conversation we just had, hey, go get your head right. And I also thought that was interesting, something you don't hear from Jerry. There was a moment in our conversation with Stephen where he did say, maybe it was a little heavier than it needed to be, the punishment, but that he made some poor decisions. I don't even know if we've ever heard that from Zeke.
No, I think it was good that because all too often the Cowboys, in my opinion, have portrayed Ezekiel Elliott as the victim. that he didn't do anything that merited punishment. Jerry was very specific in saying that there was no evidence to suggest any level of wrongdoing, much less anything that would justify a 6-game suspension. So I think when you do that, I think you're just empowering the player to continue behaving in the way that he had to that point. And I think what Stephen has clearly said here is put some of the responsibility on Zeke Elliott for the predicament that he's in and for how that's affected his football team. They lost 3 straight games without Ezekiel Elliott here, and they built the whole franchise around having him on both sides of the ball. And so I think it's important that he know he has a responsibility to his teammates and that his behavior has to change, or as we've said before, inevitably, he's going to put himself in this very same position again. So I did think that that was a strong comment and a necessary message that the Cowboys front office somehow send to Ezekiel Elliott, because they obviously know he listens faithfully to the Doomsday Podcast. And I think the other part of it, the physical part of it is, hey, we not only want him to come back a different person and a more responsible citizen in the community and somebody we can depend upon for our football team going forward, but his history has been he hasn't worked a lot. Because the Cowboys have tried to protect him from injury in camp and so forth. And so he's gotten off to these sluggish, poor starts his rookie season and again this season. And obviously the Cowboys feel like that was partly the result of him not being in top physical condition. And they want him in his best physical condition when he comes back for the final 2 games of the regular season, assuming they win in Oakland and can get meaningful games in front of them when he is back on the lineup.
It is, and one other thing we talked about involving Zeke is, the NFL's continued, and they talk about these things, and maybe it'll be in the next CBA, who knows, these suspensions where a player that has gotten in this much trouble, that on the surface it just seems so strange that you would say, okay, yeah, this guy's been a problem, but let's get him away from anything that could help him. Let's get him away from the team. Let's get him away from his teammates. Let's get him away from what Stephen referred to as a football environment. And to us, Ed, to our ear, Cabo did not sound like the greatest idea in the world. Now, okay, and Stephen's got to be very.
We don't know that he spent all of this.
We don't know that.
Right?
We don't know that. But I, all we know is that he tweets during games. We do see him tweeting during games. And last night he used some old Friday Night Lights, the actual book Friday Night Lights from way back. He used some kind of statement, I think, talking about Rod Smith, and everybody's like, "What's Zeke talking about?" And it seems strange that they can't have more involvement. And here's what happens. Here's what I think happens. Now, this is not anything that Stephen said, and I don't think Stephen would ever confirm this. There are people the Cowboys have sort of loosely tied to the Cowboys organization that aren't maybe officially on the payroll that might be able to keep an eye on Zeke and try to sort of monitor him. I have to think that things like that, not just the Cowboys, but across the league with a player like this. I have a hard time thinking the Cowboys literally would just say, hands off, we can't have anything to do with you, and we have no clue what he's up to. I don't call me cynical, but I don't believe
I'm
that's
assuming
the
at the very least they know people who are accompanying Ezekiel Elliott. They know his family members. They know those with whom he associates. It's unlikely he's traveling by himself. I'm sure whoever is coaching him or in charge of his workout program while he's away is somebody that the Cowboys can communicate with and can do so legally. I don't think the NFL stipulates that you can have no communication of any kind through any source with the player. They can't have any direct contact with the player. I think there are plenty of avenues for teams to send messages back and forth and get whatever information they need about what a guy is doing and what changes they might recommend in that regard. So I do think they probably have a pretty good sense of what he's doing, where he is physically, and what their expectations should be for his return.
I think what they probably should have done, since the Cowboys have talked to us about wanting to partner in some way, they probably should have sent the two of us over to spend a little time with him. I think that would have been good for the young man. I don't know. I think you would be a good influence. I'm not sure. I could drive him maybe to some further bad behavior. Now, Ed, I want to say this. I thought it was also interesting. He took off the brave face for a minute. You know, you have to show faith in your quarterback even when he's going through a tough time. And Dak Prescott was going through a tough time. I wrote this down. Steven said, we had a difficult time finding our identity. And I thought that was an interesting thing. That was an admission. We all know it, and we all know that things kind of fell apart, but it's always interesting to hear somebody at Steven's level acknowledge, and it's easier to acknowledge it once you've kind of gotten to the other side and had a couple of decent performances, but that is interesting to sort of acknowledge, yeah, we were kind of in a bad way.
Well, and to do that is to accept some responsibility, right, for putting together a roster that was not able to absorb this loss, and those of Tyron Smith for a couple games and Sean Lee. And as devastating as, you know, those losses are because of the quality of those players, you know, Steven acknowledged that in the future they've got to build a roster that can sustain that kind of thing. So, yeah, he acknowledged that. I thought he also was very eloquent and forceful in their devout belief in the quarterback. A lot of people still have questions. There's still a lot of, you know, Romo faithful people out there who think that Dak Prescott is not nearly as accomplished a player and never will be, and that he was wronged in Prescott taking over the team and not giving it back when Romo was healthy. But I think Steven really gave you a sense of just how committed they are to Dak Prescott and how much they believe that he is a franchise quarterback, and they're set at that position, barring any unforeseen, you know, injuries like we see every week. But barring that, they think they're without question, they think they have the right guy at the quarterback position going forward.
And I even Dak went through such a difficult time that there was even some thought on, okay, down the road, I even heard talk of, do they need to start thinking about in the draft another quarterback? And I mean, I thought that was quite maybe a bit of an overreaction, but I did hear some of that out there. And that's how quickly, and this is such a week-to-week league, people can lose faith in a quarterback. Now, we saw yesterday, he needs help. This is a quarterback, and every quarterback needs help out there. I mean, think about it. Ben Roethlisberger went through a rough time. It seems like every year. You know, is Big Ben through? Is he going to retire?
He questioned himself, right?
He did question himself.
Maybe I've lost it just through his third 500-yard passing game. The only guy in history to do it last night.
But it helps to have somebody like Antonio Brown,
right,
who is, you know, insanely talented and seems to be capable of almost on a weekly basis putting up. I mean, he was over 200 yards again. Those kind of explosive days don't seem to happen for the Cowboys or Des Bryant. But it was good to see him turn one play into something big. Now, does that mean, you know, sometimes we overreact on the positive side? Oh, he's back. He made one play. Well, again, it is the Giants. You said it. Janoris Jenkins was out. I mean, he's out for the rest of the season. That's a beleaguered crew. They put up a fight. Once the Cowboys broke through, you know, it was all bets were off.
Yeah, well, there's no question that the Cowboys had the good fortune of a favorable schedule, right? I mean, the Giants, for all they were supposed to get back in terms of momentum with Eli Manning being reinserted as a starting quarterback, their two-time Super Bowl MVP, the reality is this is a bad football team. They're 2-10. They have the worst defense in football statistically. They just fired their head coach and their general manager. And sure, maybe that gets some guys feeling insecure and everybody plays a little harder than you would normally expect on a 2-10 team. But they're still a 2-10 team, and they're a 2-10 team for a reason. They've lost a lot of people on both sides of the ball. You know, no Odell Beckham Jr., no Brandon Marshall. They never improved their offensive line. So this was a perfect set of circumstances for the Cowboys if you have to go play a division opponent on the road. But let's be fair and say that Steve Spagnuolo has was 2-1 against Dak Prescott, and the Giants had not given up more than 19 points in any of the previous 3 games they'd played against him. So it was important under the circumstances for the Cowboys to go win the game. They didn't really even dominate the game. It was really a stalemate for 3 quarters, and except for these 3 plays, maybe the Cowboys would have lost the game, but instead they won in convincing fashion, and they did it a different way, and I think that's important too.
I think it is, and Ed, I think it's important now that we talk about something that's very important to me. And Ed, I want to get you involved in the D&M leasing world. It is you've seen that Audi Q5, and you've got nice vehicles, Ed, but I don't think you've really experienced the beauty of leasing a vehicle due to the huge popularity of their November sale. D&M Leasing is extending the sale through the end of the year. Ed, I believe that'd be like December 31st. That means that you still have some time to get a great deal on a new car for Christmas. More than ever, people are deciding to lease because they love the flexibility of being able to drive a new car every few years. I've done that, Ed. With D&M, Easy Lease, you can get a great Christmas gift, not make a payment until February. You'll also save up to 50% a month versus buying and have no early termination fees. Here's how you do it. Call D&M Leasing today, any local area code in 35 Lease. That's 35LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. And it's any local area code. That's what's your area code out in your part of the country?
972.
972-817-940-214. So many ones right off the top of my head there. Call D&M Leasing today. Any local area code 35 Lease. That's 35LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. Call is free. Not calling will cost you thousands.
Is there a special code I can use?
And that new vehicle. Doomsday Podcast, and so pleased earlier in the podcast to have had Stephen Jones. It is Ed Werder, Matt Mosley, live from Frito Nation Productions. And Ed, I do want to say, as we kind of look back at this game and some of the things that occurred, one thing Cowboys have to get cleaned up, by the way, is this defensive line play, lining up the neutral zone, the offsides, the hard count seemed to get them. That's something we need to they need to look at. One thing, Ed, and I know you've got some numbers to back this up, some interesting yards after catch. This team hasn't been one of the great things for them, but certainly with Dak completing some of those short passes and then turning into big gains. Ed, what did you see on that front?
Well, Steve Spagnuolo obviously is a defensive coordinator and now interim head coach for the Giants. And so he obviously feels that they have to try to win the game on defense. And so he was very aggressive at certain points in the game, and the Cowboys really exploited those opportunities because when he went with 0 blitzes, which means, the receivers are manned up and really there's nobody in the deep secondary, if they avoid the first tackler. And we saw the Cowboys take full advantage of that in a very uncharacteristic way. They had 3 plays of 50 or more yards. That's the most for the Cowboys since 1994, their glory years with Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin and that group of players. And the astonishing thing was for the Cowboys to do that because they came into the game against the Giants ranked dead last in the NFL in yards after the catch. With 903. Their most productive player after the catch, Des Bryant, who ranked 62nd in the league with 214 yards. Jason Witten's 169th, Cole Beasley 206th, and Rod Smith 316th. And every one of those guys obviously had a 20-yard pass play, and 3 of those obviously went for more than 50 yards. And so the Cowboys obviously benefited from the big play. We've talked about this is a team that doesn't have a lot of different ways to win, and their formula has always been the same. Run the football, dominate time of possession, protect your defense. Rarely have we seen them win with a quick strike game plan mentality, but that's what happened in this particular game. And obviously it helped that Des Bryant, who had 2 big drops very early on, benefited from the fact that his antagonist, cornerback Janoris Jenkins, is on IR. So it was a depleted Giants team, and defensively they're last in the NFL, so it was a very timely opponent for the Cowboys to meet, but a very uncharacteristic way for them to win the game.
Love it when you talk yak.
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 Like it.
Yak. Yards after catch. Cowboys doing a little better job there. And I thought Des Bryant finally, when you had that opportunity, was able to bounce off that defender, and that was the first time, that's where you see the strength come in. Part of the problem with this offense and the lack of playmakers is just not getting separation. We've talked about that before. Ed, I think you had the point about, some of these quarterbacks have to learn in the NFL to throw a guy open. And that's hard when your guys just aren't getting much separation. And then it's really hard to stay confident in your wide receivers when they're dropping balls, whether it was a Son or whatever. Cole Beasley, big drop to not extend a drive. Des Bryant with a huge drop on a back shoulder
plays,
throw.
really. Back-to-back plays.
Yeah. Let me just tell you this, though. The yak can also come in, and it doesn't count. So I don't think this is true. But, this isn't completely logical what I'm about to say. But you can, and I know that shocks you, your quarterback sometimes in his ability, and this is where I'm reminded, I wrote about this yesterday for the Morning News, I'm reminded of a young Donovan McNabb when I see this. It's when a defender comes in there like Olivier Vernon did, and it led to, by the way, a missed field goal, which is something we need to talk about. What has become of Dan Bailey? Olivier Vernon comes around the edge, and he gets Dak from the blind side. I mean, Dak feels most quarterbacks go down there.
He had an awareness.
He did have an awareness. He felt the pressure was coming. He ducks down and somehow basically kind of slides Vernon off the other direction. That takes, Ed, tremendous lower body strength from a quarterback. And I would say that about 85 to 90% of NFL quarterbacks go down there. I mean, Vernon, that's a sack. They basically surprising the quarterback. He doesn't have time to really do anything. He got out of that, and he completed a short pass. Big play to me. And that, again, is what we sometimes focus so much on deficiencies and what does he do that maybe Romo didn't do? Oh, my gosh, he's not throwing the ball downfield, this and that. And what's that? Yeah. Okay, there we go. And continuing to confirm that Tony Romo will never join us. But he did. He was able to keep that play alive. And I believe when we talk about Dak Prescott, and I know you have some things to say, maybe you believe the Dak crisis might have come to an end, but that is something he can do that most quarterbacks can't.
And he's a big physical. He's 240 pounds, and we've seen him, and we saw it in the game against the Giants at key points, take off and run. He is second on this team in rushing touchdowns to Ezekiel Elliott. So he does have a unique playing style. And what was interesting about the play you were talking about, you're right, it should have been a key third down sack and the Cowboys punt. Instead, he completes the pass, keeps the drive alive. And guess who doesn't get up after that play and stay in the game? Olivier Vernon. He's the one who got hurt. Instead of the quarterback getting hurt, the defensive end, the pass rusher got hurt. And, people will say, you mentioned the crisis for Dak is over. He played 3, really poor games. But yesterday, back to efficient, ball placement, very good, allowing the receivers to run after the catch. That's been part of the problem, but their inability to separate, I think, has been the biggest issue of all. And the fact combined with his philosophy of not putting the football at risk. And you're right. Steve Young said, once, talking about college quarterbacks versus pro quarterbacks, said, hey, in college football, everybody's open if you're the quarterback, and in pro football, nobody's open. You have to throw them open. And people will say, hey, Dak, he's a check down type quarterback. He doesn't challenge a defense down the field. And it is true that in terms of 20-yard passes, ball in the air, he's got the second fewest attempts to the rookie in Chicago, Mitch Trubisky. But he also demonstrated he can make big plays yesterday by keeping the ball close to the line of scrimmage, throwing short passes, and your receiver doing the big part of the play and creating yards after the catch. And, Tom Brady and Drew Brees are guys who complete the vast majority of their passes within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. That's just the way the game is played now. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Dak Prescott's philosophy and how he plays the position.
No, I think you're right, and I like the way this is playing out for a couple reasons. Ed, I believe this quarterback in this offense, but mainly this quarterback needed a couple of wins without Zeke. because if Zeke came back and then everything went back to normal, what we would have had as far as, and for this head coach, by the way, this head coach needs this too, because this head coach has now gone through a period of time where he couldn't do it without Zeke. Before that, he couldn't do it without Romo, and other teams, it would be okay if every other team, when they got a couple of key players hurt, fell apart. Minnesota hasn't. To this point, the Eagles haven't. Now they're going to lose. We're going to see what they do without Wentz, but they do have Foles, and we'll see if they can continue to play on. But this head coach needed this, and I think this quarterback needed it. I don't think he ever lost the faith of the locker room. I really do think. We've talked about his intangibles. The leadership is there, but the play also has to be there. And I think this is important for him to get these, especially this. We all know that a lot of those yardage came late. I think he had 174 yards through 3 quarters, and then a ton of it came in the fourth quarter.
200 yards came on 4 plays.
Correct. But it's still good for a quarterback that's going through what he went through in a downtime to end up with whatever, 330 yards in a big day.
Career high, 332 yards, and matched his career best with the 3 touchdown passes at a time where he was being scrutinized and criticized really for the first time in his NFL career. But I think what he did last year and the way he won the locker room over and made it impossible for Tony Romo to return to the lineup even when he was healthy, that spoke volumes about the kind of demeanor, the kind of unflappable confidence that this guy has. And he just does not react in a negative way to anything that happens to him on the field during a game, on a larger scale during the course of a week. He seems to be the kind of guy who's not emotional, and he just puts all of these negative things aside and concentrates on getting himself ready to do his job.
Yeah, it's a great thing, I think, for him. And a great thing for our show is that D&M Leasing has partnered with us, and they had monitored us throughout the year. Ed, how they doing? How's Doomsday doing over there? They liked what they heard, and due to the huge popularity of their November sale, D&M Leasing is extending the sale through the end of the year. That means that you still have some time to get a great deal on a new car for Christmas.
Is that where you're getting me?
Well,
Harry's Razors
yeah,
and a new car.
It's you've been great. You've had a good year, and you did get Steven today. So yeah, I'm thinking about it. With D&M's Easy Lease, you can get a great Christmas gift and not make a payment until February. You'll also save up to 50% a month versus buying and have no early termination fees. The sale's the biggest savings offer in all of D&M's 35 years of business, with great deals on 2017 closeouts and lower interest rates. You don't want to miss out. Call D&M Leasing today. Any local area code in 35 Lease. That's 35LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. Again, it's any local area code in 35 Lease, 35LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. And the call's free. Not calling will cost you thousands.
I have to call. I can't afford to lose.
And that new vehicle. Don't talk over my tagline.
No, I've always wanted one of those Christmases where there's a big bow on a vehicle outside. We've seen the commercial. I think it's Lexus or somebody, but it could be D&M Auto.
D&M, hey, you can get a Lexus. If you want a Lexus, my wife has a Lexus from D&M. Thank you, D&M.
I'm learning things now.
Ah, yes, thank you, D&M Leasing, for all of that. And Ed, as we say goodbye, and I'm going on
that time already?
I'm going on an adventure, by the way. I'll be leaving the country this week, but
forced departure.
Yeah. I'm having to. A lot of folks, a lot of creditors after me. I'm going to flee the country, but no, I'll be back. I'm planning on coming back. Ed, final thoughts. We know what the Cowboys need to do, and I thought we really appreciate you getting Steven on and Stephen Jones spending some time with us. I thought Stephen was very, obviously they have a lot more confidence right now. There's some excitement. They know they're to face a Raiders team that is having a big-time trouble, may have pretty much given up on the season. And Stephen said something, I think you caught this. He said something to the effect of, hey, we think we can run the table. I mean, something along those lines.
He used that specific phrase. I don't know if he meant run the table through the regular season or he was including the playoffs and the Super Bowl into that. But
let's go with the latter.
Okay. Well, I think if you believe that, then your confidence is reinforced by the fact that Dak Prescott in the last 5 quarters of football has won 2 games, and he's thrown 5 touchdown passes and no interceptions. So he's back to playing error-free football. Look, the whole thing for the past month for the entire organization was, all right, we've lost our best player, Ezekiel Elliott, and we heard Steven say, hey, you know what? It even surprised us that this happened to this extent. We knew how much we valued Ezekiel Elliott, but we didn't expect to encounter this level of adversity without him. But they did. And so now they've overcome it, and they've got one more game to try to go win on the road in the black hole against the Oakland Raiders, a team that isn't very good on defense. And, Derek Carr has obviously taken a step back. He was, expected to be one of the young franchise quarterbacks. A lot of people thought the Raiders were a Super Bowl contender. In fact, I picked the Raiders and the Packers myself, and it looks like I will be wrong on both counts now. But their objective to win enough games that the season there was still something to play for when Elliott did return. That is now a realistic, attainable goal. And all that stands between them and that is this game against the Raiders. Obviously, they've got some things they've got to resolve. I think the last guy we would have expected to be in some kind of a crisis is their kicker, right? Dan Bailey, the most accurate kicker in the history of the NFL, missed 2 long field goal attempts and an extra point yesterday. But I think if you give anybody a pass and assume that he's going to rebound from it, Dan Bailey's that kind of guy.
I think he is. I'm not ready to call this a full-blown crisis. But hey, if they hadn't, gotten things going in the fourth quarter, you would have come back and said, hey, those Dan Bailey, Dan Bailey 50-yarder, the 53-yarder, those were during the point of the game when you really needed those. So it was something that bears watching. I think he'll come out of this thing and be just fine. And I like the fact that we sort of are all conditioned to talk about the swirling winds of the Meadowlands, and we sort of forget, now that's a new stadium. I'm not saying there aren't some winds, but I don't know if it's quite as severe as the old stadium. I'm not sensing that it is, but I think the guy's he's in a bad way right now. He's going through we've been there with our golf swings, and sometimes mine never comes back. But I think Dan Bailey will get it back together. And I think the Doomsday Podcast will continue to roll on, even with me out of the country. And I appreciate it. Tell everybody good night, please.
Good night. And I may be doing this by myself next week. We'll see. Negotiations are underway.
Maybe forever. Good night, everyone.
Lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.